All right, guys. Our next guest is the CEO of Seven Generation Games and the 1984 Judo World Champion. She's also the mother of one of the biggest stars in sports, Ronda Rousey. It's a pleasure to welcome back Dr. AnnMaria De Mars to Submission Radio, and welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you.
Now, and welcome back to the program. As we mentioned in the intro, Seven Generation Games, for those that don't know, is a startup which creates learning games for children. We've had a look at the Twitter, and it seems like there's been a lot of exciting developments in the company in 2016 already. Can you tell us a little bit about how it's all going?
It's going terrific. One of the things that's really a big leap forward is adventure games. Like you play something like World of Warcraft or Super Mario Brothers. Those types of things have had to be played on like a console or download onto your computer, which for school doesn't work very well for a lot of reasons. So we've been able to create adventure games that now you can get a username and password, click, and play the whole thing on the web. And it's really, really, really cool. We've now got it come out with our first game that's bilingual. So if you have kids, I don't think it's as big of a deal in Australia as it is out here, but if you have kids that English is their second language, they can flip between Spanish and English, or they can just play the game in English, or they can use the game to learn Spanish. So, and it teaches math. So it's a really cool adventure game where, like the latest one we have, you are thrown back in time and you have to work your way back to the time and place that you came from and go through all these adventures and use math along the way and not get killed by the natives. It's very cool.
What's the feedback like? Because obviously when you hear educational games, you know, some people might think like, I don't really want to play an educational game. But on the other hand, you guys make it sort of all about adventures and fun. You guys, the aim is not for it not to feel like an educational game. Is that the kind of feedback that you guys get? That people don't really see it that way and they just enjoy it more for the game itself?
That's exactly it. Kids ask their teachers if they can play it. And some of the interviews we've on the TV out here they've done with kids are really cute because you would think we set them up to it, but they don't. And they will say things like, I'm going to go home and ask my dad to play this, to get this game so I can play it after my homework's done and I can play it every day. So a lot of kids like to play it outside of school when they're done their homework. And it's one of those things, like Maria said, there comes an age where kids say to you, I'm not going to do my homework and you can't make me. And the truth is, after a certain point, you can't make them. You know, you have middle school kids who, they're just not going to do it. You can take away their phone, you can make them sit in their room, but if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. So we tried to make these games that were fun enough that kids wanted to play them, they wanted to get ahead, and the only way you can get to the next level is if you solve the math problem, like for building pyramids. Like the Mayan Indians in Central America, South America built pyramids. So you're building pyramids, and the king is kind of looking at you because your pyramids aren't getting built as fast as the next person. And the reason is because they were smart, and they had all the workers lift rocks and figured out what's the median, what's the average that a person can lift, and then they got all the stronger workers to work on their pyramids. If you can figure that out, yours will get built way faster than the others, and you won't get killed by the king for being slacker. And so it's that kind of stuff. And then if you get it right, not only do you not die, but then you get to go in this 3D part in the world where you pick up these giant blocks and put them together and make pyramids. So, yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, well, it looks like being the CEO of Seven Generation Games is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job. Just wondering, how do you manage to do it and still run your judo seminars and work on all of your other projects?
I do very few judo seminars. I teach at an inner city school 1 day a week. Actually, my daughter Rhonda started that program 6 years ago when her older sister was a history teacher there. And so the program has been going on for a long time. I teach 1 day a week and my friend teaches a second day. And that's usually the only time I can carve out. So I do a few seminars with those kids. So if there's a camp, if there's something going on that I can bring 15 or 20 of the kids to, then I will go. But other than that, it's really hard. And it's funny because, you know, the other people who win world championships in judo go and they found a company that sells mats, or they start a judo school, and I decided I'll get a PhD and specialize in applied statistics and write software that teaches kids math. So I kind of break the mold in a lot of ways.
You went in a completely separate separate direction. You mentioned Ronda before. It's funny because when we were organizing this interview, you wrote to us, said that, being Ronda Rousey's mum wasn't your actual job and that you're busy with 7 Generation Games. With Ronda's popularity, have you found that being Ronda Rousey's mum has almost been a full-time job from all the interviews and fans constantly approaching you?
No, because I turned down almost all of them. I think you asked me 4 or 5 times before I could manage to do it. And like right now, I'm driving around town trying to find stuff for my random patches. So no, I mostly just say no because I just don't have the time.
Yeah, well, there it is. All the listeners know the horrible, horrible truth behind how many times we ask you to do an interview. But speaking of 7 Generation Games, one of its investors, Ronda Rousey, hosted Saturday Night Live. For those wondering if it's even a big deal, it is. It's a big deal here in Australia. Saturday Night Live is a huge program. Just wondering, what did you think of her performance, and where and who did you watch the show with?
I thought it was great, and I watched it with my husband drinking wine randomly for Christmas. Ronda got us a Wine of the Month club subscription, so every month we get two bottles of really good red wine. So, yes, I watched it on a couch with my husband drinking red wine from our Christmas present, and it was great. And I especially like the gym feed. I thought it was hilarious. And also, I always wondered that, when you watch those shows where there's the mean girl, he does all the stuff, I think, why don't you punch you in the face? I would. So I think for half the women in America that grew up, watching those shows and people like that in their school, we were just all sitting on our couches going, yes, that was great.
Yeah, not just women. The one where Ronda Rousey was getting bullied by the popular chicks, I like how that played out, where, she just punched her in the face. Because I think that's what a lot of people wanted to do. And it was good to see her do that. It was great to see Ronda back in the spotlight, especially because we haven't obviously seen much of her recently. And now news has come out that Ronda and Tina Fey would be starring the head role of the movie Do Nothing Bitches, which of course is a now famous saying that Ronda came up with. How exciting is it for you to see Ronda's success in Hollywood outside of fighting?
I think it's really great. And, one of the things about Ronda is she's not just an athlete. She's very smart. She went to a magnet school here for kids who were accelerated in science. She was outstanding in math and science when she was a kid. We always thought she'd go get a PhD in marine biology or something, which shows you how well we predicted. But she's super hardworking. So I think with a lot of people, they're very talented in fighting, but they don't have a lot of skills outside of that. And fighting is not a thing that has a long, very wide window. You don't see, people in their 50s that are fighting. And often with athletes, my oldest daughter, Maria, the one that wrote the book with Ronda, Maria worked for Sports Illustrated and ESPN, and she told Ronda all the time when she was younger, you don't know how many people I covered their contract when they were out of high school or college, and I covered their bankruptcy 5 years later.
Wow.
You need to watch it. And I think Ronda's very, very smart to be hedging her bets.
Well, we spoke to Jean LaBelle, who really encouraged Ronda to transition over to acting from fighting sooner than later. As her mum, where do you stand? Obviously, there's a competitive nature there that Ronda loves, but at the same time, acting doesn't really result in you being heard and not being able to eat an apple, for example. Would you prefer for her to move away from MMA?
I think when you, and I say this from somebody who has actually had experiences, you leave a sport when you're ready. It doesn't matter what anybody else wants, what your mom wants, what the fans want, what your coach wants. You'll know when you're ready. And I think many people in every sport are not honest enough with themselves to look at their heart and say, I'm done. I mean, I could tell you after the World Championships, it was everything. I would have taken my heart out and eaten it in front of the referee. Well, maybe not mine, but my opponent's, if that's what it took to win. And I'm not kidding you. But when I was done, I was done. And I knew after that I didn't have the same thing. And I think anybody at any time, when you don't feel that, when you don't wake up every morning and the first thing through your mind when your eyes open is, how can I beat this person? How can I be better than everybody else? When that quits happening, then you do something else. And, I quit. I was never sorry. So I think whenever Ronda has that feeling, she should hang it up and do something else.
Well, let me ask you, and I don't know obviously how often you speak to her, whether it's a daily thing or it's you guys talk every sort of week or month or whatever, but based on the conversations that you've had with her, what do you think? Where do you think Ronda stands in that respect?
We haven't talked about it too much because I told her flat out that I think that guy she was training with was an idiot and a fraud, and he's being investigated for bankruptcy fraud out here, for tax evasion, for mortgage fraud. They just suspended his license for falsifying his application. He was convicted of 2 counts of identity theft. And so, we don't talk about that much because I told her flat out, as long as you're training with this guy, I just cannot stomach that.
Well, speaking of Edmond,
so I don't know what she will choose to do.
Yeah, well, speaking of Edmond, let's just quickly touch on her last fight. It was here in Melbourne, actually. So we were here live for it. We were covering it here live, and it was a crazy sight seeing Holly Holm do what she did to Ronda in that fight. Obviously, a lot of media have discussed it over and over, and the strategy that Ronda had going into the fight seemed to fall in line perfectly with what Holly was looking to do. But, as a mother, as well as obviously someone who coaches, what did you make of that fight? It would have been a very difficult experience watching what happened.
I predicted in advance Ronda trained with an idiot. She trained with an idiot who's a fraud. I would be shocked to find out if that guy has any record at all. I mean, as far as I know, I saw him fight once, and he fought somebody who had a record of like 6-20 and won on a split decision. Or maybe it was a universal. Anyway, he won on a decision, somebody who had a drastically losing record. The guy's a fraud. And Ronda had a lot of talent. She has a lot of talent. She came into that gym with a very strong, 10-year background of training at the Olympic level, and it carried her a long way. But she needs to train at judo. She needs to get away from some egomaniac fraud and be herself. And Ronda as herself can beat anybody on the planet. So I'm sad about it, but you become an adult and you make decisions, and sometimes you make mistakes, and hopefully you learn from those mistakes.
I'm just wondering, you mentioned before that, obviously how you feel about Edmond and how it almost sounds like, not to say that you're distancing yourself from Ronda, but even I think I read where you said you didn't come down to Australia because you said you loved her more than winning. I'm just trying to sort of understand that, because she's training with Ronda. Are you sort of distancing herself from sort of her MMA career, if that makes sense? Is it kind of like, look, we're not going to be talking about MMA, you and me. It's more just sort of like mother and daughter now.
Right. I love all of my children more than life itself. Their father passed away, and I was the only thing they had in the world, and they were all I had. And, sometimes people talk about, oh, you were too hard on this. My husband died slowly and painfully over 5 years, and I supported all of us. And then he died, and I supported all of us. And I did the best I could with 3 kids and a sick husband and medical bills, and I did the best I could. And I love them dearly. But sometimes people are willing to overlook what they know is the wrong thing because, somebody's winning or somebody's making money. And, all those medals and all the money can't buy you new children. So if I think she's doing the wrong thing, if you're with bad people, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. You're with bad people. Ronda's a good person. Like I was telling you, this chapel we're going to when my grandson's being baptized, she paid to have that chapel built because the church needed it and they didn't have the money. She's a good person, and she deserves to be with good people. And so, we have our differences on that. But as far as other things, coming to Christmas dinner and being with the whole family or, those kinds of things, of course, never change. And Maria, her sister said it the best. We loved her 20 minutes after the fight just as much as 20 minutes before.
Yeah, of course. No, those are some beautiful words. And, lastly on the whole Edmond thing, I'm not talking about Edmond as a person, but on the fight, the moment that stands out
somebody
the
that's
most.
Good. I have a great idea. Let me change this instead. Why don't you, and I mean this very seriously because I don't know, why don't you suggest who would be good people for her to train with? Instead of, it's sort of like over here we have this idiot running for President Donald Trump and everybody talks about him, which just kind of keeps you in the news. Why don't we talk about people for a really good, and I'm serious about this because I don't know. I mean, I know a lot about judo. Who would you say would be a great coach for her?
There are some great coaches out there. There's obviously the Jackson Winklejohn camp that Holly Holm's a part of. There's AKA, which is a fantastic camp. John Crouch runs a fantastic camp. If we're going internationally, even John Kavanagh over there in Ireland does a fantastic job. There's a lot of great camps. And I guess the biggest reason why people are looking for Ronda to move camps is because there was one point during that fight where she went in the corner in between rounds in Melbourne, and Edmond gave her some advice that the fans weren't really happy with, where he told her she was doing a good job and didn't really give her much critical feedback that she needed when she went out for that next round against Holly. I mean, you would have watched that fight. What did you think about the way he sort of handled the situation and giving that critical advice to her in between the rounds? Because I think that's the point where a lot of fans felt like it was time for her to switch camps.
I've known as an idiot for a long time. Now, Edmond is a fraud. And I'm like, see, here's the thing. And I say this, I'm not Nick Diaz's mom, who from what I've heard is a wonderful, wonderful, kind woman, because I know Ronda's gone out and hung out with them. Or Chris Friedman's mom, who also I've met as a lovely person. But the difference between me and these other fighters' moms is I actually was a world champion. I didn't just make it up and put it on my website. I actually really did compete for 14 years. So when somebody's saying something or talking about coaching, I know if it's bullshit or not. And this guy is a complete fraud. So it did not surprise me for a second. It's kind of like, I teach statistics and I write software, and every now and then I will meet somebody or interview somebody who claims to be an expert in software development, and fairly quickly I know if they are or they aren't. And they could maybe pull the wool over somebody's eyes who wasn't as experienced or knowledgeable. And I don't claim to know everything, but I know what it takes to win a world championships. I know what good coaching is. I know what training to beat the world looks like. I told Ronda more than once about Edmond. I know what training to beat the world looks like, and this isn't it.
In the past, and you've spoken about how you injured your knee, you lost in judo, all while in the middle of a divorce, and this is a very tough period for you, but you went on to win the judo championship 6 weeks later. This sort of aligns with the theory about all greats being fueled by a loss. Do you think that this loss could be a catalyst for Ronda to improve even more, and that we may possibly, see the best version of her yet to come?
Well, I hope so. I mean, if she changes gyms, she could go dramatically further. And actually, I used to be an industrial engineer, which this sounds like it's irrelevant, but it's not.
You've done a lot of things.
Something called smarter than I look. I always tell the kids I want that on my gravestone.
Yeah.
So in industrial engineering, there's a thing called the learning curve. So basically, the first time you do something, it takes you a long time. And the second time, whether it's a podcast or building a part for a missile or whatever it is, it takes you less time because you've learned some stuff. You've learned that, you should, test the microphone in advance. You've learned that you should get all the parts that you need at one station or whatever. So the second time, it takes you much less time. The third time, it takes you less, but there's not as much big improvement, and so on. So the same is true, what I have found in sports. So if somebody trains with a coach for a long time, that coach can be the greatest coach in the world, but when they switch, they're going to improve because they've learned 80-90% of what that coach has to teach them. And they go to a new coach, they might not even know as much, but they won't know the exact same things. So this, even if she was with a good coach, which she is not, but even if she was, I think going to a different place would really improve her. And one of the things when Ronda was young, and maybe this was a mistake on my part, I took her to a lot of places and I didn't care who got the credit. It's amazing what you can accomplish if people didn't want the credit, right? So other people can take the credit. I can take her everywhere. I can teach her arm bars. But other people will help her out and teach her other stuff as long as they can say, I trained Ronda Rousey, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't care. She's my kid. I wanted her to do well. Well, maybe that was the correct thing about that is she learned a lot from a lot of people, and that's the way to do it. Anytime there's someone who wants to keep you from training other places, that's a bad coach. That's a person who doesn't have your best interest at heart because they can't teach you everything. Now, I think where it might have been a mistake is now I think maybe she doesn't listen to me as much because all those years people said, I taught her this, and your mom doesn't know anything. And I thought, well, I don't care if anybody thinks I know anything as long as it's helping her and she's getting better. But I do know that what's correct is that the people I've seen over the years who did well, extraordinarily well, are the people that trained at many places because they had the opportunity to learn from many people. And nobody knows everything.
Yeah.
So, like Ronda, she trained at home for 5 years with me and with Go Korchavichin at High Stand and with Tony Mojica. And then she, was at Paisos in Massachusetts for a few years. She was in Montreal for a while. She went to different training camps around the world. So
Yes, and I think that's true for anyone. If I look at people, because I am a statistician, right? So I'm always interested in looking at data.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at people I knew in the U.S. that had a great deal of talent when we were young, and the ones who like, won Olympic medals, world championships, and those who didn't. And one thing they all had in common is they all moved at some point. Mike Swain, who was the first American male to win the world, he grew up on the East Coast. He worked with Yanni Nesca, who's an amazing coach out of Cranford, New Jersey, who at one point was the Olympic coach. And then he moved across the country to San Jose State and went to school there for 4 years, and he went to Japan. And so that's a commonality that you see in most people who are phenomenally successful. They don't stay in one place. They stay there for a while, they improve it, and then they leave. And anytime someone doesn't want you to leave and discourages you from leaving and tries to prevent you from working with other people, they're all about them. They do not have your best interest at heart.
No, some great points made. And I guess what fans are wondering is, with Ronda taking time out and being away from fighting for the majority of 2016, do you think that this rematch with Holly Holm will eventually happen? And how do you see this rematch going compared to this first fight? And I mean, it does seem like Ronda will be with Edmond for her next fight in the UFC, which looks like to be this rematch. Do you think it's still possible to beat Holly?
I hope that he loses his license or goes to jail, because either of those are a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I think if she changes, and translates, she's an outstanding chance to win. If she doesn't, you know what? As a statistician, one of the things we tell people all the time is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Mm-hmm. If you do the same things with the same people, you can expect the same results. This is why people don't like me, because I say that I say what I call the facts as I see them and not as how they would like them to be.
No, we certainly appreciate your honesty, Anne. Now, before we let you go, obviously switching topics, we have to ask for educators or schools in Australia or New Zealand who want to try 7-generation games, what is the best way for them to get the process going? Because we know you guys are having success in the States, but if you're down here, Australia, New Zealand, how can we get around it?
They can go to www.7, that's the number 7, 7generationgames.com. And you can, any individual, you can click on there's a buy button. You can buy the game and download it and play it and get it anywhere in the world. And then if they're a school and they would like a school license, they just need to email us and we can set them up so they can use it in their school. And so now with 2 of the games, they're played completely online, so you can play them anywhere in the world. And then with the other 2, they will be that way within a year or so. But right now, you can just mail you a flash drive, or we can send you a link to download them, and you download them and install them on your computer.
Well, there you go, Australia. Get behind.
We're up for worldwide domination.
That's it. Yeah. Get behind 7-generation games. They're seriously changing the way kids learn all around the world. And as Anne-Marie said, number 7, generationgames.com is the place to go to check out the games. Make sure you do. You won't regret it. And also, for a way to get some really important life advice, she writes a lot of great articles that you can check out on her Twitter, and that's at Dr. AnnMaria. Thank you so much for your time. We know how busy you are, and I know we asked you a few times, but very lucky to have you on and have a moment of your time. Thank you very much, Anne.
All right, you're welcome. I got to go. Bye.